Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Zena Suissa, President of Residence Executive and Team Coaching. We offer services in coaching and training. I am thrilled and delighted and so pleased to have with me Judy Feld. And with your permission, Judy, I'd like to say a couple of things about you. First of all, Judy Feld is an executive coach with a highly regarded reputation. After a distinguished career as a corporate leader, her journey took her into coaching, executives, entrepreneurs, managers, scientists, and business teams all over the world. Judy has extensive experience in career, change, leadership, communication, and their generations, which we'll be talking about today. Judy is a co-founder of the Executive and Professional Coaching Program at the University of Texas at Dallas, which I'm so proud to say that I graduated from. The coaching program, UTD, received a PRISM Award for creating such a terrific program for coaching. Judy co-wrote a book entitled Smart Match Alliance, which you can see just over here. And it outlines principles for achieving extraordinary business growth and success, and everybody should get it because you can benefit from it. For your perseverance, Judy, for your wisdom, for your coaching, I am so proud that you were honored with a Circle of Distinction, an award that is not too many people have from the International Coach Federation in celebrating your credentials and your leadership, placing you at the top of the coaching profession. You are truly a mentor for me, and I will not say that to many people. You're a true mentor for me. Welcome, Judy. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Zena. I really do value you as a colleague and a friend, and I want you to know that, of course, as we met when you were a student in the UT Dallas coaching program, but now I consider you a distinguished colleague, and I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I just got the shivers. I have to tell you, I know this is being recorded. Thank you, Judy, so much. Since you're an expert in the area of generations, I believe you're one of the key experts in generations. I thought we can go through a couple of questions with regards to the generations. The first one, can you tell us a little bit about each generation?
Yes, and I think, for a while, I was speaking and writing and teaching about this, and there truly were 4 generations in the workplace. I think some years have gone by since we became aware of this generational phenomena, and I think we have 3 and 2 halves right now. And here's what I mean by that. I'll describe the generations as they have been defined by most writers and researchers. And then I want to say something about the generation that's coming up, even though that is not part of the workplace. So we start with the silent generation, and sometimes they're called traditionalists. And those were born before 1946. So if we do some simple arithmetic, they are older than 72 and older. Now you say, well, wait a minute, they're not in the workplace anymore. Oh, yes, they are. And yes, we are. From that point of view, corporations have changed somewhat, some progressive corporations. Their whole definition of mandatory retirement, which exists less and less. But more and more, the workplace for the traditionalists is a second or third or fourth career, which is very interesting and exciting. And they're dealing with the other generations in our overall global workplace. So that was that generation. Then, of course, the famous baby boomers. And we are still kicking, although a third of the baby boomers have passed traditional retirement age. We talk about them born between 1946 and 1964. So they would range from about 54 to 72 years old right now. And that age is kind of part of the I'll never retire generation, but they do have traits and characteristics that are, really are significant to them. And, when we think about the history of the baby boomers, this was the generation many years ago that said, don't trust anyone over 30.
Right.
Remember that?
I do.
And now, of course, many of them are over 60. So the traits kind of remain, but the world around us changes. I'll go a little more quickly. Gen Xers were born between 1965 and 1980. Right now, this date, they're about 38 to 53 years old, and they are kind of a bounce back generation. Um, Kind of trying to fix what their baby boomer parents, in their eyes, made up. So their approach to work is very different. And by the way, these definitions are not universal. You'll see the years varying by a number of things. And I say that before I get to the next generation, the fourth generation. Um, the millennials or Gen Y or Generation Next sometimes were born after 1981. And people are pretty clear about that. But for the longest time, I was, and others who wrote and spoke about this, were saying they went up until the end of the millennium. In other words, up until the year 2000. And that was the definition we were going by, in which case they would be less than 18 years old. And I have a representative in my family, I've talked to him about this, a 17-year-old grandson who we talk about him. He's the last millennial. He was born on the winter solstice of the year 2000, the last year of the previous millennium. And he says he's observing a big difference between him and his younger sister and that age, who are Gen Z. Now, of course, lately they've been defining Gen Z as 1996 and after, but I think we have a little leeway in how we want to look at this. And Gen Z is different from the millennials in many ways, and I'll say a little bit about them after we talk about some of the other generations. Yeah. Probably a lot of detail, but I think that answers your question.
It does. So if you're okay with that, can we backtrack a little bit, start again, and maybe tack on some values and traits which signify each generation?
Okay. And I think there's some phrases there that we'll recognize as hitting home. The silent generation. Loyalty is a big thing. They have had, up until recently, smooth career passages. They were relying on the company to be loyal to them. They were loyal to the organization, and they expected, but now perhaps are approaching differently, retirement at age 65. And are still around and kicking and didn't retire at 65 to some degree. With them, they like clarity on expectations, specificity, no big surprises, a lot of self-sufficiency. And I'm going to turn a page here because I made a few notes to help out. But I think as far as the traditionalists are concerned, there's too much changing. So if we're working with them, we want to emphasize what has traditionally worked and bring it on into current days, rather than saying, I know you're dying to know what's new today, forget yesterday. They don't want to forget yesterday.
Yeah.
The baby boomers were kind of beat up in their careers by downsizing and right sizing and all kinds of changes that have to do with technology. We tended to be workaholics with several careers and much less loyalty on both sides between the organization and the employee. So they are known to be self-absorbed and were originally called the me generation, and that was some time ago. How do we motivate a baby boomer? We reward them, not just with specific monetary rewards, but support, recognition. They work very hard and they want to be recognized.
Right.
Gen X, okay, so they saw all their parents getting beat up by all of this disruption in the workplace. And by the way, it's something I've noticed recently. Disruption used to be a negative word, and now it's not. And I'm not sure how that happened, but I think we all understand now that disruption really means significant change. It used to mean big headaches, disruption. But anyway, Gen Xers are viewed as skeptical and self-absorbed. They don't want to work as hard as their baby boomer parents, and they're not. And now they're in leadership and wish the boomers would get out of the way, which kind of makes for an interesting dynamic within companies. And they really want to be in a workplace environment with honesty, integrity, continuous training, and a little bit of leeway for their own desire for flexibility in hours and assignments and stuff like that. And then we come to the famous millennials.
Yes.
We talked for many years about Gen X and how interesting and different they were, and the millennials are even more different. They were young in the tech boom of the early 2000s, the boom and the bust and all the changes. Their parents, the term helicopter parents, applied to the parents of millennials. And they want their comforts, they want to be protected, they want their own definition of work life and balance. And because they like to have comfort, some of them move home after college. And this is the whole thing about boomerang kids. The boomerang kids are protected by the helicopter parents. Very interesting, because they're expected to do a day's work. And we've got some funny stories, and I'm sure you do too, about parents coming in to represent their kids in some workplace issues, which seems ridiculous, but it happens. So you talk to some HR directors, and they have some really funny stories about the millennials. Let's see. I'd say something about Gen Z, and why are they different? Well, they're kind of more responsive. I mean, the older ones who are more aware of what's going on, they don't want to be passive. You know, we see some rebellion there, and it's a good kind of rebellion. Part of it is these kids have always been wired. They're always connected. Technology is always there. Even the youngest of the millennials say, oh no, I can remember when there's no smartphones. Gen Z does not have that memory. There were always smartphones. We are always connected. And, you know, we see these photos of a bunch of teenagers hanging out together. How do they hang out? They're all on their phones and they're texting each other and they're in the same room. They're not talking as much. And this has an effect on their interpersonal skills.
Definitely. I've had.
Did I leave anything out?
You didn't leave anything out. And by the way, as you're talking, I was thinking of examples for each one, because I know people in each generation, but predominantly youngest generation, the Gen Z, where I saw as a professor, as a teacher in two systems, I saw kids sitting around a table and they're supposed to be doing work together. They're literally texting. And when you tell them to put their phones away.
You mean literally, don't you?
Literally, yes, literally, figuratively and literally. They used to put their phones underneath so nobody could see them, you know, and this has been a detriment in some ways, because they're not the point of, I taught group dynamics. The point is to learn how to work as a group. Instead, they're texting each other and texting others. So it's been quite a change. And this doesn't come only from me. It comes from most professors where they had to deal. And the workplace. When they're in the workplace, they're constantly connected. So Judy, based on you have a wealth of experience on the generations, obviously, which would be easiest for coaching? Most amenable to coaching?
You know, I've been thinking about that. And I think there's a caveat before I answer that question, because I do have an answer, but they all need different approaches. So we as coaches need to be different coaches, not because we change our overall approach, but we can emphasize various coaching competencies and approaches and models depending on the variability of who our client is. So it's how we coach. We want to balance the competencies so that we're really reaching the client where he or she is living what is meaningful for them. So if we can do that, and it's my premise that resilience and resourcefulness and curiosity are some of the most important characteristics of coaches. And by the way, generations is one of many variables. So we're shifting for many reasons. We're shifting because of behavioral styles of our client. We're shifting because of experience, knowledge, capability. We're shifting whether they are introverted or extroverted. And so we're really, without being self-conscious about it, we're different coaches for different people. But given that, I think Gen X it used to be when I started coaching 25 years ago, all my clients were, probably between early 30s and 60. That is not the case anymore. I have a wide range, some clients in their 20s, some clients over 70. So it really has changed. But as far as Gen X are concerned, one of the things they really do like positive feedback. And when they are getting a positive vibe, they will engage. They want honest messages. So, when we're looking at coaching competencies like direct communication, powerful questioning, Gen X is wide open to all of that. They want to grow, they want to learn, and they're curious, but you need to be authentic with them. They don't want one-way communication from those that are leading them. And it is interesting what's happened to meetings recently, because most meetings in organizations have a leader and multiple generations. If that leader is not aware of the generational differences, they are going to annoy or bore or turn off a good portion of the audience. So you've got to kind of vary the meetings, and maybe they're not all in person, and maybe there's a lot more interaction, and that's what Gen X wants.
Yeah, when you're talking about meetings, it's what we're doing right now, which is very virtual. So I imagine the meetings probably could be virtually done as well.
And of course, with some organizations, they're widespread. Yes. And, I have provided and facilitated meetings with people coming, from really all over the world, mostly all over the English-speaking world. And you can feel a different sense of what empowers people to make their greatest contribution, depending on not just their generation, but a lot of other things that have to do with what is their favored communication style.
True. So now that we know that there's differences between all the generations, when you're called in for a coaching contract, what do you think are the biggest challenges for a leader? I'm just asking that because my thoughts were perhaps this leader has somebody younger than them that's vying for their job. There's a lot. Yes. I imagine there's a lot of challenge there for leaders.
Well, as I mentioned before, there's an enormous number of Gen Xers waiting for those boomers to get out of the way.
Exactly.
And they're not getting out of the way. And well, I think the challenge for the leader, and it can almost be summarized into something that we can unpack a little bit, but there are many styles of leadership. We have authoritative styles, collaborative styles. Goldman has talked about those leadership styles, and you probably have wonderful research in that, which I'll ask you about another time.
Sure.
But the coaching style of leadership, if adopted by a leader, I think can make the most inroads in bringing everyone together to maximize the results that they get as a team. And team is an important factor there because we get away from the authoritative approach, move toward the team approach. And it doesn't mean that leaders need to be, quote, educated as coaches. They don't need to be professional coaches, but I'm a big believer in learning coaching skills to apply to their leadership style. And if they can do that, um, you can flex with your employees. In other words, if something's not working, you try and experiment, you ask different questions, you give different assignments. And I'm a believer in risk-free experiments that you can establish that whatever the outcome, you've learned something without enormous risk.
I totally agree with you. And when I go into a company, I don't call it coaching skills. I call it a new language, a different way to speak to people, because the word coach doesn't always appeal to them. So I'll just use a different language, and they're open to that. I see that they are open to that because things are not working well. Help me with something that will help these people around me. You mentioned teams. Teams are another breed, I think, because you're dealing with different from all different roles and different climates and teams. You know, have you coached teams as far as this generations?
Are you speaking? Are you asking about Gen X or
generations and coaching teams from like people from all different generations?
Yeah, and it's hard for them to really operate as a team. You've really got to set some very specific expectations and allow them to be flexible as the work of the team moves on. And really, there's going to be ebb and flow about who kind of takes the lead in where the team is going. But you want to make sure those people who are thinkers, who are introverts, who are maybe not as fast to jump in, are valued for their wisdom as well. And that means, again, a good, skilled leader. And sometimes it's the traditional leader, the boss, but sometimes it's someone on the team who can step up and really be developing their own leadership skills because they're really good at this.
So it's an understanding not only about teams, but about personality. Because like, as you said, you have introverts, you have extroverts, you have ambiverts who kind of take on both, you know, and I've seen a lot of that.
So you've been reading Dan Pink's stuff about ambiverts.
Exactly, the ambiverts. So they take on different characteristics. And I believe we have to be open to that as well. We can't take an introvert and basically shake them up and make them into an extrovert. It just doesn't quite. I think acceptance and not quite creating a standard for these people because this is who they are. You can't just make them into different. We'd like to sometimes, but we really can't. I just want to ask you one more question, and thank you for this. Thank you so much for this because I think
my pleasure.
There's a wealth of knowledge here. Coaching the leader themselves. How would you coach a leader so that they will feel more inclined to not appease, maybe that's not the right word, to have greater employee engagement and employee satisfaction? How can you help them understand through coaching skills?
Well, I think we're talking here about values.
Yes.
And organizations have values as well as individuals have values. Mm-hmm. And if a leader can help, I don't mean do it all herself or himself, but articulate the values of the organization and the values of their particular team, whether it be small or large, and have open and honest discussions about how they intersect with the values of the individuals. And the best question a leader can ask is, what do you need to be successful in this assignment? Not, here's what you have to do. So the questions, the opening up, being interested in optimizing the results coming from an individual by understanding how you can support them, support rather than boss.
I totally agree. And this comes back from the authoritarian style of leadership, where there's the autocrat, the dictator, bringing it to what is needed in the team or the workplace or the leader, whatever it is. I believe that. I think you have to change with the times. And I think the times have changed to more of the asking questions rather than thou shalt obey.
And many leaders, of course, then bring in coaches for their high potential employees or their peers or their senior leadership team. But the one caveat there, and this may be an interesting place to close up, but I do not work with people who are sentenced to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it works.
Mm-hmm.
And in some organizations, less now than before, they will say, you need a coach to improve your performance. They're sentenced to coaching and they don't want to do it. So on a positive note, the people I work with are enthusiastic about growth and change, and coaching becomes a joy.
Knowing you, Judy, I think that you're a gift as a coach. I think you give them you do. You give them so much opportunities with your knowledge and your skills. Thank you again. This has been a joy. Coming back to home, University of Texas at Dallas, I really feel it's a joy. It really is.
Well, thank you. And I really am very impressed with your interview series, and I look forward to viewing all of them.
Thank you. There will be a link, and there'll be many, many to watch. Thank you, Judy, very much. Be well. Be well.
You too. Enjoyed it.
And we will be in touch. We will be in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you again.